All right, we're live.
Live.
Live?
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, it's even more, so.
All right.
What? Oh,
Whenever you're ready.
I called to order the committee of the whole meeting at 6:30 P.M. on Thursday, February the 6th, 2025, at the boardroom of Hartford, of course, high school, and that's for a roll call, please.
Mr. Grossman.
Here.
Dr. Marovich. Here. Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Ms. Williams Lee. Here. Dr. Livingston. Mr. Brownhouse.
Here.
And Mr.
Here. I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel of the district and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel of the district to determine its validity. However, immediately considering increase in compensation to a specific employer of a public body is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be posted and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. Collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered in the minutes of the closed meeting.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Marovich.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
Ms. Williams Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Grossman.
Yes.
Mr. Brownhouse.
Yes.
And Mr. Kowski.
Yes. The yeses have it. We go close. The yeses have it. We go close.
Sorry.
Whoa,
Nope.
that's authoritative.
All right, here we go.
Ready?
Mhm.
Okay, we are resuming open session. And our first order of business is public comment. Lisa,
None.
is there anyone here who would like to make public comment? Okay. With that said, we will move to our minutes and approval. So I move to approve the January 9, 2025 committee, the whole minutes as presented. Are there any corrections, adjustments, or modifications needed?
Second.
Okay. Then second, and we will voice vote this. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. All right, we will move quickly then to our instructional committee agenda, which consists of one item, the discipline improvement plan. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. So we have two folks here to help answer any questions and explain this item. This is something to be submitted to the board of the Illinois State Board after the board vote to approve it. So we in 2 weeks from now. This is something that the board has seen a year ago. It's really a very simple format. With that said, I will open this up to Principal Linda Parker and Assistant Principal David Lorraine, who's online.
Thank you. David just logged in. This is a form you have seen before, as Dr. Johnson said. It comes back every year because we have to track the data for 3 years to see improvement. Specifically in regards to the racial disproportionality as defined in the third bullet point that you saw on the cover sheet of the memo. And so we actually are here to see if you had any other questions about the data or information provided in the report. We submitted this, it has to go for a public vote and then submitted to the state after that.
So I'll start. Well, no, go ahead.
No, that's fine, go, you roll up, you probably are gonna ask for
So we had 51 incidents school year 2023. Then it went to 22 incidents school year 2024. I would have thought I would have seen a couple things. One is that is such a dramatic change that there's no real analysis or discussion of how such a dramatic change occurred. That's one question. The other is that it's going to be essential to know, and I realize this also came up in our last discussion of a discipline report several months ago. The 51 incidents in school year 2023 involved how many students? How many unique students? And the same question would apply to school year 2024. I think that's another essential thing you want to know. Well, pause and let you.
Absolutely. And Mr. Lorraine, you can turn your camera on and microphone on, that's fine, or to respond as well.
Yeah, I would say that data could be included.
Did
is
you
what
hear
is
the
what-
question? And we don't hear your voice though. I see you talking, but we don't hear you.
I'm not muted.
Okay, there you go.
We can hear
We
you.
can hear you now.
Great. Yeah, I would say that data, I agree, is useful. It just wasn't part of the initial rationale for the way we approached the state's question. So the state's question really was motivated by what is driving disproportionality in out-of-school suspension and expulsion, not really breaking down number of students involved. Our motivation is to show that we are addressing the root cause of out-of-school suspension, which for us is getting to the gist of why students are committing offenses that really warrant an out-of-school suspension or something more serious. And for us, that analysis is really about addressing trauma. So I agree, we can definitely always include that data. The reason why it's not in there is that it just wasn't part of our original theory of action.
So should I take that to mean that you don't actually know offhand how many unique students were involved in school year 23 and school year 24?
I know that we have to pull the data that way to actually see the number of students involved in each incident, because they're tracked by incident, and then there's also a way of pulling to find out how many students per incident is there.
I actually do think I know that number. If we're talking about the 19 out-of-school suspensions, is that right?
Or, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, or the 22 in 23-24.
Yep, that was I want to say either 17 or 19 students, but I can definitely pull a 100% accurate number and send it out to you guys. What we did not see there for the out-of-school suspensions is virtually any recidivism, if that's what is driving the root of the question. They were virtually all unique students.
And I remember last year I got kind of caught up in this report. And one thing I'm wondering about is, you produce this report in a way that, on the one hand, is it designed to simply satisfy the regulatory requirement of the state? Or is this intended to be part of a larger analysis of which kids are affected by,
Great question. This actual data is for this report. So we actually do a separate report for the board on discipline that includes extra information that you're seeing. For the state, we're just reporting on what they're asking in terms of how the metrics are being measured to the strategies that we put on here that we're working on to bring our number down. So this one is not for the board to answer those questions. It's just for the state.
all right, so all the curiosities that are provoked by reading this, you're
Yes,
saying the time to dig in is going to be when you bring back.
correct, which will be a more in-depth report on how the school is doing in terms of actual incidents and cases.
Okay, so,
Can I just ask a follow-up?
yeah,
Is there any opportunity or possibility of doing it at the same time?
I would
Yes,
say if we did that for the state report, we would be
Yeah.
giving them way more than what they're asking for.
that's my,
Well, I'm not, I mean, we could still, I'm just saying for the board's perspective, because, there is a larger data set that is presented, and if that larger data set then has a report that then goes off to the state, the questions that we are asking are really part of that, and we don't have this kind of two-time discussion where can we synchronize them? And it would be beneficial to me as a board member to have them synchronized, because that way we're talking about this topic once and not kind of approaching it from different angles.
yeah, they're timed different because typically we come to the board with an end of year report. And this is always done mid-year. So this is answering a question on the past, but we usually bring you a more comprehensive, but sure, we could do it at the same time and not do end of the year. Absolutely.
and getting back to what you said, the objective is, satisfy the regulatory requirement of the state. It's more a presentation to them than to us, even though as we read this, we're gonna be asking questions. And just shoulder shrug and say, yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, I'll make just a couple of final observations. Last year, I asked the question, well, where is the actual data that shows that we do have disproportionate students of color engaged in out of school suspensions? And I had to ask and got a verbal response, and the answer I was given a year ago was that it is all Black students who are receiving out of school suspensions. Is that still the case?
It is not only, but it is disproportionately, yes.
The other thing I got caught up in last year was a reference made to, we're close to Chicago, and that's kind of given as an explanation. Last year I got concerned about imprecise language because it stated that rising crime is happening in Chicago, and therefore it's the reason that we have disproportionate OSS. We've eliminated the rising crime bit, but we still have this language that says we're close to Chicago, and basically implies that, yeah, there's nothing we can do about it, we're close to Chicago. And so the reason I'm asking you about how many discrete students are involved in each OSS incident is because if you can mask the individual students and then look at their specific cases and situations, they may or may not be from Chicago or have family in Chicago. That's the reason I sort of resisted what felt like almost a flippant reference to Chicago as we're telling you the state, because we're near Chicago, that's all we do. So I guess between now and when we have to approve this, I would really ask you to think about if this is really still what you want to be saying. And is this just carried over from 2, 3, 4 years ago when we first started writing this report to satisfy the state? I think that concludes my comments, and I do appreciate the chance maybe to move this into that bigger discipline discussion that's going to come at the end of the year, because I remember that from the end of last year, and I thought it was a good conversation.
Thank you. David,
Can I respond to that really quickly?
Please.
I appreciated that feedback from last year, and that section was removed from the final draft of that report as a result of that feedback. I just want to point out that the reference to Chicago does play out when we do our deeper analysis of the data and look at who the students are that are involved. And what we find on our in-school analysis of the suspension data is that the students who are involved in these incidents carry trauma, and in their history and our personal knowledge of these students, that trauma is coming from the city of Chicago. And when we compare data for students that have been in Oak Park their entire lives and are also students of color, we do not see the same behaviors manifesting, and therefore do not see them present in the data in out-of-school suspension. So I definitely appreciate the perspective from somebody who's reading it the way the report is written, and I think you have very valid questions. The actual analysis, when we look at who the students are that are involved, they pretty much always have history and a connection to coming from Chicago or spending time in Chicago and having family in Chicago. So that's why it's there, but I do get the sensitivity. We're trying to connect to the trauma, not to the city. So if there's a way to adjust that language to deeper that connection, and talk about the trauma that the kids are carrying, that is the impetus of the our theory here.
So I understand what you're saying, but I think first thing I want to make sure we all have a basic understanding of what you mean by trauma. Okay, what is it? I mean, we've hired a trauma intervention specialist, and what are we talking about when we talk about trauma?
So, and David, I'll start, and you definitely can add in. Movement in terms of being shuffled between homes, not necessarily having stable schooling at the same school for elementary or for middle and high school, different expectations in family life versus when they come to Oak Park and into our high school, what the expectations are, different accesses to freedom here that is not like where they have come from, and how they react to that when they come here, and how then they receive the redirection once they're here. And the trauma will sometimes play out in those things. There's also issues just in terms of the way they manage conflict. Outside of home and here at the school being different in terms of how they have been sometimes taught to manage that level of anger or upsetness when they come to school is different and where they from, where they've experienced home life. Dave, do you have more?
I would just definitely add connection of some sort of violence, either being a victim of or being a witness to or knowing people that have been impacted by violence.
Okay. And so I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. So because we are responding to a requirement of the state in this report, doesn't mean that it's not useful for our use. Okay. And so I would hope that we are drilling down. If we're talking about anywhere between 25 or 22 and 50 some odd students, it's not a lot of students. So the data can be really, can be drilled down as to who these kids are, where they come from, all right, what kind of supports they've had in the past, to really understand them and provide them what they need. My other question is, we're not the only school that files this report. All right, do you do any comparative discussions or interactions with peer districts to see the kind of things that they're saying versus what we're seeing and how they react to it, how they handle it versus how we handle it? It seems to me that this kind, especially the way this report's laid out, it really lends itself to a bigger discussion than just Oak Park happens to be on the border of Chicago, and this is what our problem is. Our others, I'm sure there are other schools that have problems and are addressing either in similar or dissimilar ways.
And we have not, as of today, gone to comparative districts with it. I know that you only get to having to do this report for one of the three reasons that's listed in the memo, and disproportionality of students with their either expulsions or out of school suspensions is just one of the three ways. So we would have to drill down to others who are on for the same exact reason as we would to see which schools that,
Yeah, I wouldn't
that is.
think that too.
Mhm.
It's certainly based on our conclusion that this is based in trauma.
Mhm.
Then I would think that any diverse school would be having this kind of an issue.
And it's important to also note that our number is coming down as a result of our implementation of the behavior education plan. So our number of out of school suspensions has significantly decreased because it's a progressive discipline. So when you speak about digging into specific kids, there have been usually prior things that have happened before they've gotten an out of school suspension. And so there are interventions and other things that have been in play for their tenure before getting to out of school suspensions most of the time. And so that would be something that would be that we could pull up for sure.
In terms of the trauma, are there assessment done for ACEs for students who are coming in just to understand what kind of what issues or challenges that we
Very good question. Yes, as trauma interventionist definitely uses ACEs as one of the tools to actually try to figure out and assess the amount of trauma that is there, which is one of the things that is given to the data when they put into effect the MTSS interventions for the student to access. So yes, that is one tool.
Yeah, and I would say, for your question about peer district, I think it's always good with the data. However, my guess would be we would not have as many districts that would have the same profiles we have when it comes to diversity, because we look at ACEs or adverse childhood experiences,
Mhm.
they typically happen in neighborhoods and communities where there's a lot of violence, where there is a lot of poverty, where there are a lot of
Mhm.
different things. So they may have ACEs everywhere, but the level to which you see them are gonna be very different in some
Yes.
communities versus others. So there are some things that are a bit unique about our school.
Mhm.
And I think it's really commendable around the work that's been done to address the trauma, to actually start getting these numbers down.
Yes, and our closest comparative school of that same would be Evanston, which is right on the border at Rogers Park, that has the closest type of demographic type that you're correct. The further you go out, the more that changes.
Yeah, I think just related to that, I think we use the term peer district and comparative district, and we have multiple sets of that. We have that which we are from an economic standpoint. We have that which we've recently talked to really from a academic performance, but this one really is more of a geographical, where our students come from peer district analysis. So I think we just gotta be careful of the term, and thank you for spelling that out.
Well, I would echo Graham. I don't think you need the Chicago language in there. I don't think the state needs that specific thing. So I might suggest looking to taking it out. And then my other question is, I mean, I really appreciate the overall work and the attention to trauma and intervening early at an earlier stage. Like all of that is great. Reading this report as if I were like a state person reading it, it feels a little bit like you say, here's the thing that causes the incidents. The thing is trauma. And I think I might suggest framing it a little bit more as primarily trauma, because, you know, this is not my field of expertise, you guys know more than me, but my understanding is that, you know, issues like economic insecurity and so on, like there's a set of things that typically lead to teen violence. And so I would maybe hesitate a little to like say, oh, it's trauma, because next year we might have some child that is not that. And it could be, I mean, I did like a quick look at, you know, they include things like drug and alcohol abuse, psychological problems, peer pressure. So just if you maybe just say, and I think especially economic insecurity, you spoke to poverty, it might just, yeah.
I think we also have to keep in mind when we're talking about the specific space they're referring to, out of school suspensions for us in accordance to our BEP is going to be things like fights, different things that typically students of color show up in, which is why we also have to specifically try to explain what that is versus like vaping is not going to show up there, right? But we have more kids of non-color in that, right? So that's what ends up having, how do we explain that group? Well, the out of school suspensions go for things that are typically a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah,
And-
I mean, I'm thinking of some of the incidents that we've had, and I do feel like the trauma is there, like that's clearly there, but often aggravated by something like peer pressure or, you know, so I wonder whether framing it as, you know, there are multiple causes. The primary one that we've encountered in these cases is trauma, childhood trauma, right? So I think I mostly just like don't want you to get like snagged by some official coming back and being like, how can it all be? So, thank you.
Really interesting conversation. I remember, Graham, your question from a year ago about Chicago, and that jumped out at me this time as well, but I'm glad that you've asked it again tonight, because I think the conversation has gone in some interesting directions. Linda and David, I would really welcome a thoughtful addition to the full discipline report that you're going to bring to us in a few months. With a section addressing and analyzing this cohort of students that we know are coming from Chicago, did not come from an Oak Park River Forest feeder district, but are coming to here from Chicago, and breaking out that student population and disciplinary action or transgressions, within that cohort. I think that could be really interesting to see. That's a whole new strike that I hadn't thought through. And I think that overall annual report would probably be the best place to do it. So I'll leave that to you and how to talk about that. But I think the board would be interested to know that information.
There's I'm sorry, that took that's really parallel to the conversation that we had in November when we were talking about the state of the district and freshmen on track. Yes. Information.
Yeah.
And what might be another layer to this is to overlay both things. That's right. Yes. And see what they're telling us. So anyway, absolutely filtering, it might tell us nothing. It might tell us, but we need to look at it, figure out filtering our discipline numbers like this by feeder district is certainly doable with what we have in the time. So.
No, that actually makes a lot of sense, and I think to the whole question about Chicago, native Chicagoan, but I would also say, where in Chicago are you from? We get kids from all over, right? So look in terms of where Chicago we come from, kind of how that plays into things that we might. Very true.
Yeah, we should use Chicago as a model. Yeah, that's fair.
I would say just a comparative of those that come from our feeder districts.
Yes.
97 and 90 versus others.
Yeah, local feeder versus yes. Good.
We need to sign off on this, or?
We will bring this, thank you for the question. We will bring this back to the board in 2 weeks. We'll see, we'll probably make a few adjustments based on this conversation with the understanding that the meat of this conversation will be, my metaphor is gonna fall apart now, but the gist of this conversation is going to be realized in our later conversation.
I might argue it's not aligning the two reports. Because I do kind of think that having a full year-end analysis is more helpful for us than just having the mid-year ones. We don't have to look at it twice. I'm not going to be here to look at it, but that's my recommendation. That's my thought.
One thing we might be able to do, however, is align this. Let's not commit to this right now, but it might be realistic to align this with a semester kind of analysis for the current year. And see if that's useful, but we should interrogate that a little bit. But short of that, I think we should. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move to our finance agenda. Oops, yes. Our finance agenda, of which 2 items will be discussed. Leading off with the campus safety camera system upgrade and expansion.
Starring. Okay, we have several bits of information in this, so I believe Tony Arborgrass is online there. Yes, he's not in-house today. Yes, I see him here. So this is some upgrades to our camera system here, and as you noted, we have a lot of information in this report. It's obviously in line with our core operations, facilities, and finance, and with district policy, fiscal and business management. And it has implications in a variety of ways for school life. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Arbogast. And Tony, would you like me to I know we have also in the call, we have Kristen Devitt, our Director of Campus Safety, and we also have Eric Hackle, who was joining us remotely 2 weeks ago. He's our Director of Educational Technology. So Tony, I don't know which of the 3 is taking the initial lead on this.
Sure, I can kick it off. We had a number of cameras that need to be replaced that are not functioning right now. This was a budgeted expense, but given the total, in order to move forward, we need to bring it forward for board approval. We do have, as you mentioned, Eric Hackle here that can answer if there's technical questions on the cameras, as well as Kristen Devitt on if there's any questions related to the cameras and security. It's really, when it comes to security cameras, a joint effort of managing the technology and from the back end, making sure that the cameras are used to keep our building safe and secure as possible, or capture images of when needed throughout the building, and then also with the finance team to both pay for it and manage kind of any of the maintenance that may be done on the install through B&G.
I have no questions about the cameras. Oh, great job.
I just have a comment, but is that I know, over the years, there's always discussion of camera placement and where they are, and I applaud the efforts here to try to continue to improve, to get, as thorough coverage as you can across what's a pretty vast campus. So I appreciate there were some details related to that, and I know there's been discussions and they've been listened to, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
The only thing I want to point out is that we had a budget of $250,000 for this project, and it's coming in on, what's the number, 173, 610. So,
That's what's about.
and I'm assuming that the scope of work in the budget and the scope of work in the actual bid are congruous.
Yeah, Eric, did anything change between the original intent and scope of the work and what we actually got back in the bids?
No, it just, we had to do a best estimate based on what we thought was wrong with the system, and there was areas that we could improve upon without spending dollars, and so it plus negotiating helped, so we didn't really lose anything, we didn't really add anything more than is on that, so it worked out for our advantage.
Okay.
Do that every time.
Okay, thank you. That concludes that one. And we move to our next agenda item, which is the, oops. First student contract extension for special education.
Yeah, thank you. So this is, it's time for renewal of this contract. And so again, Tony Arias is here. Andrea Newman, our Executive Director of Special Education, is here as well. If we have any questions about the actual services that they provided. Also online is Ken Thomas, and the board hasn't met Ken before, but he's here on camera. He's our new Director of Purchasing and Transportation. We're really thankful to have him here filling that role. So I will turn this over. I'll just note to the board that this is for a annual estimated cost of basically $57,000, and we would bring this back to the board in 2 weeks for approval. So with that said, I don't know if it needs much by way of introduction, but if there are questions, we can certainly do that.
It's 40,000 below that, so appreciate that.
Any questions? Fred?
Yeah, no, the only thing I would have to say about this is to have only a 3.5% increase, and we know that busing has been over the last several years busing has been a real issue. And so I don't know if things have settled down in that industry, because there was a point in time where they couldn't get drivers. And the prices were skyrocketing, and I'm wondering if maybe Andrea has an idea of what's going on. Has things settled down in that industry, and is this what we can expect then, because we have other busing issues that come up during the course of the year as well.
I mean, I can speak to our own drivers, I think through. Well, I can only, again, this is full here, but stabilizing, we have had a very good set of drivers on a regular basis consistently. We have made efforts to get to know the drivers and then request them on a yearly basis, because it's really good for our kids to have the same drivers over and over again. I don't know about the industry itself outside of Oak Park, but I think through just me doing the job a little bit longer, also knowing building relationships with first student has been really important. So we have contacts at the company. So I think it's just been, it's been a very good, a positive experience over time. I don't know, Tony, if you want to talk to the, usually more
Sure.
the general industry.
One thing I would like to add is, when I had first started, we had taken, a contract extension that, was more painful of an increase, substantially more painful, in order to do a market correction. And at that time, we had, I remember speaking to the board about, when it came time then to bring this renewal forward, we would see something much more standard that, we had put the effort in to attract the drivers. It's important to know that this contract today is strictly for our special education routes. So this does not pertain to the field trip and athletic routes that are staffed but have their own challenges with timing. But when it comes to special education, we've got a good group of drivers, and things have started to normalize in that industry a lot more. And then after a good amount of back and forth negotiation between First Student and Ken and myself, we're very happy to bring this percentage forward. We did do there's some comparative analysis that gets done across numerous districts in the state, because some of them ask that their information remain confidential as they're still in their negotiation phases. We can't, name names of districts or rates, but these rates are very in line with where the market is for special education right now. And it's called a single tier system, because we don't have a unit district. We don't run, the same bus drivers for, 3 different time spots for elementary and middle school and high school. So we're called a single tier route system. So yeah, we're very happy with the extension we're able to bring forward this year.
I have a request that I've asked for in the past. You know what it is?
Not yet.
We get pieces of transportation requests throughout the year. And Tony, you just said, this one's for special education and this one's for that. And as a board member who is losing his memory, it would be helpful to just have what I would call the big picture. And you can say, here are all the different transportation services we provide. And here's when they come due. And then when we have one, we can say, we're on letter C. We're doing this one today, just so that we can understand, I think, the bigger picture of transportation, because I may confuse this with a different, busing bid that we get them in pieces. So just that would be helpful to help see the big picture, including even areas where we don't have transportation, right? And we have had discussions about, requests on, do we provide, just student transportation, et cetera. But I would like to see a bigger picture. as a thought. But I appreciate the effort here and the keeping the rates tight.
No, understood, and I would like to give Ken a lot of credit in this area. He is working because we have so many of these one-off contracts, especially with First Student in particular, to get a standard contract that consolidates it all together and allows us to bring it forward at one time. We were unable to get that done at this point. We still have a couple areas we're talking about in other contracts. But that is coming, and what we can do as well now that we're starting to see our rates with the renewals is for information in a near board meeting, we'll be happy to put everything together in terms of all of our different contracts, just so it's a little bit more clear.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that completes the finance section. We now move to our policy and permission to film for documentary.
Yeah, so a week from today, is it today? A week from today? We have our tradition of excellence, our annual tradition of excellence. The board member that we shifted that from the fall to the spring as we were looking to, maximize the number of instructional days for the semester. So that's a good little reminder first and foremost. And secondly, this is a nice little unique request. It's kind of a one-off, and I will give it to Karen to tee up. And I will just say though, because of the timing of this, we are not doing our regular kind of 2-week cycle here. We're going to talk about it here, and this is on the agenda to be approved in special after this discussion. So Karen, why don't you go a little intro? And I know we also have somebody online.
Yes, we have the filmmaker, Dan Hovren, whose dad, Buck, is going to be honored posthumously next week at our Tradition of Excellence Awards. Dan will be there to accept the award. Dan is a filmmaker, and he's making a documentary about his dad, who lived a very interesting life. And he has asked permission to film the Tradition of Excellence ceremony itself, as well as do some footage, take some footage of the school parts that existed when his dad was here, which aren't so many as there are now. He graduated in 1927, so I actually have a map of when different parts of the building were built, so I can show him those parts to film. The one piece that's come up that was not in the letter of request that's in the board packet, he has connected with John Conley and would like to, he's going to be visiting John's new scene class, I believe it is, and he'd like to do some filming in the class. And of course, as always, I've communicated with John, and John will let his students' families know about the filming, and if there are any students who don't want to be included, they will not be in the shot. So, like I said, Dan's here on the Zoom. If you have any questions for him.
I have one. First of all, congratulations prematurely. In terms of the actual TV traditions of excellence and filming that, would it be, there's the presentation specifically, the presentation involves students that are giving it. And then there's a presentation for the different recipients. Are we talking about filming his dad's piece only?
I'm not sure, actually. Dan, could you clarify? Did you want to do the whole ceremony?
He's on mute.
We can't. You're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't want to get anywhere earlier in the meeting, but I find it rather fascinating. There are students in the school today at Oak Park River Forest High School that would be graduating in a class 100 years after my dad graduated, which I find rather remarkable. That's the span of time we're talking about. And it's also very fascinating to me. It just so happens that the other two recipients of the Tradition of Excellence Award in this particular session, one of them is a very highly celebrated military officer, and the other is an Olympian, which are two areas that my father also distinguished himself as a very highly recognized World War II hero, as well as a professional athlete, as well as a Olympic bronze medalist. So there's, various components in that area that are rather fascinating, and certainly I would have permission and talk to those individuals, have the opportunity to, but there may be interesting elements they also bring to light that tie into my dad's story, and with certain permissions, I would like to see whether it's okay with them that if I deemed it interesting to include in the story, that they would allow me to do so, which I would only do with their permission. The other element about talking to and being with John Conney's class is that his students will be also the New Scene students will be filming the event for New Scene, and then he asked me to talk to the class, and I just thought it'd be very interesting, since I am a filmmaker, for me and the one who's a son who's doing this exploration of telling a story about his father, that it might be very interesting to film the questions or interactions that I might have with students regarding that journey. And again, would have the potential of including in the film if they were filmed, but only be included with the appropriate permissions.
So yeah, the key question that I have is, if it's third parties and if it's students that are presenting, all of those, we're talking about having permission. It's not just the ones in Johnson. So we just need to make sure we're disciplined in doing that per policy. Thank you.
I mean, I if I don't know if all the permissions can be gotten beforehand, but certainly, after things are filmed, before they would be included in anything that I were to utilize, I would, be willing to come back to me and all parties to seek their approval.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so as Dr. Johnson said, we will be moving to vote on this in just in a few minutes. Okay, that concludes our policy agenda. We do not have any governance for this evening. To be resumed in 2 weeks. With that said, are there any requests for future agenda items at this time? Marianne?
So I guess I'll say this is coming out of some sticker shock at the cost of prom dresses. So as I'm a senior and I've been shopping, and it's kind of reminded me, the way the library and the Park District operate is the library doesn't spend money unless they don't do anything unless they can offer it for free to the public. And the Park District says, well, it's better to do more things and charge, and we'll do a sliding scale, right? So those are kind of like two philosophies of how public bodies can operate. And here our base classes are free to the students. But there are things like summer school that have additional charges. There are certainly a whole host of extracurricular activities. I think there's a supplies fee still. And so I guess as an agenda item, what I'm asking for is, I feel like after 4 years on the board, I don't have a good sense of what the additional costs are for students to attend the school. And, what are the required costs, like things like fees? I'm not sure what else there would be. And then what are the optional things, but some of them are not so optional, right? And something like, it's one thing to say, okay, a sports team or a music group might need to raise funds to travel to a competition. But something like prom that is like an expectation that all the seniors will go to, I wonder about that. So I guess my agenda item is kind of a request for administration first to see if they can do a kind of an equity analysis around what additional costs our students bear to attend the school. And then C, are there places where we can ease the pain, for not very much proportionately? Does that make sense? Okay. And we do have like a common closet, right?
We do,
Good.
we
Okay.
absolutely.
So that right now is, you've thrown it to Dr. Johnson to kind of consider, right?
Yeah.
And we'll either then decide to bring it back if it requires board discussion or board work, but right now it's just an information request. Okay, all right. Others for potential future agenda? All right, seeing none, I move to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. We will now immediately flip over into our regular board meeting. I'm sorry, our special board meeting. So I'm just getting the agenda up here as well. And lights, camera. Action. So I call to order the special board meeting at 8:21 p.m. on Thursday, February the 6th, 2025 in the boardroom of Oak Park and River Forest. I will ask for roll call, please.
Mr. Winsley,
Here.
Mr. Lisbon,
Here.
Dr. Maharaj,
Here.
Mr. Bramley.
Here.
Mr. Arkin,
Here.
Mr. Costi.
Here. First order of business is public comment.
There are none.
Our second order of business is action items, of which there are 3. The first, I move to approve the personnel recommendations, including resignations and leaves of absences.
Second.
And is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Winsley,
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane,
Yes.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Bramhurst.
Yes.
And Mr. Costi.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously. And our second is I move to approve the 2025-2026 incoming student Chromebook purchase in the amount of $427,420.
Second.
And is there any discussion? And this item was presented at the committee, I'm sorry, at the regular board meeting in the end of January, 2 weeks ago, just to connect the dots for everyone. And with that said, no discussion, therefore, we please call the roll.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Ms. Winsley,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Bramhurst.
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane.
Yes.
And Mr. Costi.
Yes, passes unanimously. And thirdly,
Skip that next one.
pardon?
Skip the next one. That's a mistake, so it didn't go to. the
Yeah,
next one.
okay, that was, thank you.
No, my script.
Oh, and
Yes, thank you. I got it. I
The
got it.
purchase of a tutu for you.
I'm game.
Okay. What color? Yes. All right, I move to approve the request to film the Tradition of Excellence ceremony as part of a documentary.
Second.
And is there any additional discussion on this matter? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Winsley,
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Bramhurst.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
and Mr. Costi.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously. And with that, I move to adjourn the special meeting at 8:24 p.m.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.